This is Stephen Janis reporting for the Real News Network in Annapolis, Maryland. The Trump administration wants to go back to get tough policies, lock them up. How is this affecting other states, and how is it playing out on the local level? Well, we're here to tell you and show you what's happening. While the Trump administration's Justice Department has been unambiguous in its efforts to roll back reforms, the question remains on how will federal policy impact local laws, particularly in blue states like Maryland. But if recent moves by the state's Republican Governor Larry Hogan are any indication, local officials may not provide a buffer to renewed efforts to push law and order measures.
This year, let's crack down on those violent criminals who use guns to commit crimes by passing tougher minimum sentences, and pass truth in sentencing legislation to require that repeat violent criminals serve their full sentences without the possibility of suspension, parole, or probation. Well, we've got quite a bit of money for law enforcement, and you'll see the details of the budget tomorrow when it comes out. But again, as we do every year, we added more money for law enforcement in Baltimore.
That's because Hogan has introduced a package of bills adding stiffer sentences for possession of a handgun, charging more juveniles as adults, and adding penalties for gang membership. It is a stark departure from his Justice Reinvestment Act, passed just 2 years ago. Legislation intended to lessen the burden of incarceration and dedicate more money toward jobs programs for former inmates.
I think we've got, we've got a violent crime issue, and we need the tools to address that now.
But inside the Senate Judiciary hearing room, it was hard to find any hint of reform.
This is the part where we're seeing 353 homicides in Baltimore City. We're seeing homicides all across this state, and they're being committed with handguns.
The committee is chaired by Bobby Zirkin, a Baltimore County Democrat who has been a consistent roadblock to police reform. Last year, the Real News was there when Zirkin blocked allowing a single civilian on internal police disciplinary boards.
It's a little concerning to me on multiple levels, but as a precedent, that a county would come down here on issues that are unrelated to this and say, well, we didn't like the way that our bargaining with Baltimore County's teachers went, so state legislature, can you pass a bill to undo this?
And in the past, he has been a huge recipient of cash from the bail bonds industry. But still, some members of the committee did indeed push back.
Repeat offenders are really victims of the collateral consequences of having been arrested and imprisoned in the past. They can't get jobs. That's why a lot of them are trafficking in drugs.
Problem there, because I think you would agree with me that we do have some bad situations, and we do have bad officers who, and it's come up recently and proven, they plant drugs, they plant guns. That's a concern.
Are we really being smart? Are we fiscally smart with the way that we're channeling our resources? Is it really worth investing in prisons and longer sentences, or maybe shifting that money and investing up front in something that we can ensure that the next generation doesn't get caught up in the cycle that we see and we find so many of our folks in today?
Yes, I think very real concerns about how much this might cost the people of Maryland. And if anybody has any figures, has anybody ever done a study or put a value on these 343 people killed in Baltimore City? Is there a dollar sign that we can relate that maybe satisfy my friend?
Which led to a heated debate that seemed to split along racial lines.
Mandatory minimum sentencing is not an effective strategy. The proof is in the pudding from the mistakes that we've made over the years to what got us to become the #1 incarcerator in the globe, the United States. This is a mistake of the past.
I don't know what other committee is going to approach the social welfare programs that might help in some of the things that you're talking about. But the focus of this particular committee, among other things, is how do we handle this particular tool of the entire approach of our legislature.
I'm slightly disagree with you, I think a part of this is still a multi-pronged approach. We don't just sit here and determine that the only way to do this is tough laws. I mean, we did just the opposite of what you're saying last year.
Including this exchange where Senator Robert Cassilly presses community activist Nicole Porter of the Sentencing Project about her data.
The community generally say, look, send Junior back in for another 10 years into the community because we have a great level of tolerance for his violence, or is the community generally saying, lock him up? What's the community that the perpetrators are coming from and going back to? What are they saying?
I think there's a mix of voices within communities that have high rates of incarceration, are disadvantaged, and also experience high rates of displacement.
There's mixed voices in every community, but do we have any studies about the victims? That's what I'm asking about. Studies about the victims.
Let me provide you with a couple of studies from the communities that are most impacted by this.
Yeah,
that 66% of juveniles who were sentenced to lengthy prison terms actually witnessed a shooting, not a shooting that they committed, but a shooting that they were exposed to prior to their criminal
But that's not really where I was coming from. You're not answering my question.
Well, those children are coming from the communities that you claim to be most concerned with.
Well,
they are coming from communities with incredible amounts of violence and with high rates of residents who've been disappeared behind prison walls because of the lengthy prison terms that are already on the books and that have increased.
This is just anecdotal stuff. You're just looking at anecdotal stuff. I was really looking for
No, that's not anecdotal stuff. I'm providing you with statistics from a peer-reviewed study of people who are not only...
What's the name of the study?
It was a study by the Sentencing Project, which is a well-regarded, which is the organization I'm represented, a well-regarded organization that provides research and information regarding criminal justice system.
Okay, thank you.
And he was joined by others who questioned people from the community about the legitimacy of their views.
You're talking about the trauma inflicted on people when they go to jail. What about the community that is afraid right now, and what about the community? What about what's been happening to young people that are having these things happen to them? I mean, can you comment on? Can you give us kind of on the other hand, or your perspective on that?
Of course, absolutely. We know that we're not talking about just letting people walk away from whatever crimes that they've committed, but we're talking about sentences that are just, extreme sentences.
Of course, Republicans are not alone in failing to pursue real reform. Recently, Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh vetoed a $15 an hour minimum wage, a move advocates said would reduce poverty and address the underlying root causes of crime. And she also approved a separate law to impose mandatory minimums for gun possession. We actually asked Hogan about the community concerns regarding his ramp-up of cops and prisons.
Well, I don't think that's true, but like I said, this is we've increased state police funding, we've increased monies to Baltimore City and other police departments, and
programs like jobs and things like that.
What's that?
Job economic type programs or programs that will help long term, other than law enforcement.
Well, sure. I don't know if you were paying attention, but we've had some of the fastest job growth in America and added 130,000 jobs to places including Baltimore, and that's continuing to be our primary focus.
Finally, Dayvon Love, of the Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, made the case that going backwards on criminal justice reform was not an option for the communities who must live with the consequences.
This is essentially a way to try to get folks that are proximate to the kinds of violence that we see in our communities in order, quite frankly, to get the numbers down from 343 to 250. And to me, that kind of quantitative difference is frustrating because the impacts of the violence that exists in our community is not just about the numbers, it's about the impact that it has on the families.
This is Stephen Janis and Taya Graham reporting for the Real News Network in Annapolis, Maryland.